It's time for Morton in the Morning on WVBF, a weekly get-together with your friends at Morton Hospital. Coming to you every Wednesday at 11:05 a.m., Morton in the Morning brings you full access to the latest hospital news and health information. Stay in the know about important health and wellness topics, new doctors and services, and upcoming events. And get to know the team at your community hospital. And now, Morton in the Morning.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Morton in the Morning. I'm your host, Julie, and we are coming to you right here from Morton Hospital, your community hospital in Taunton, and we have a really great show lined up for you today. We are going to be speaking about the topic of mental health. A great topic because, as we know now more than ever, it's so important for us to take care of ourselves, both physically and mentally, and take care of our mental well-being. So lots of great content today coming with our special guest. But first, a couple of announcements. We want to thank everyone who came yesterday to our in-person hiring event. We had a great turnout. We were hiring for all nursing and clinical positions as well as ancillary department positions. And again, great turnout, some wonderful candidates who will hopefully soon be joining our team. If you missed that hiring event, though, it's not too late. Don't worry, we still have plenty of open positions available. And you can apply online anytime at jobs.steward.org. Just go to that page, search Massachusetts, click on Taunton, and then you'll see a list of all of our open positions, and you can apply online. We are always looking to grow our team as our hospital continues to grow. The other announcement is the Best of the Best Community Choice Awards. We want to thank our community because Morton Hospital has made it to the voting round in 6 different categories thanks to your nominations. So those categories are Best Hospital Medical Center, Best Hearing Aid / Hearing Specialist, Best Physical Therapy, Best Orthopedics Center, Best Places to Work, and Best Weight Loss Center. So thank you so much for nominating us. The voting period will kick off on August 8th, so please keep that in mind. You can vote for us daily once the voting starts, and that will run through August 23rd. Thanks again for nominating us in all of those categories and helping us recognize our incredible staff. So we have so much information coming in today's show, so so that we don't run out of time, let's jump right in. Our guest for today's show is Brienne Wapenyi, and she is an outpatient therapist in our outpatient psychiatry clinic right here at Morton Hospital. So, Brienne, we are so happy to have you here.
Hi, Julie. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
First time on our show. Yeah. I'm glad you're excited because oftentimes people are nervous. So.
Nervous and excited. How about that?
Great. So, tell us about yourself and your background.
Yeah. So, like you said, my name is Brienne. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. I've been practicing for about 10 years now. I graduated with my master's degree in social work from the University of South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And before that, I went to Bridgewater. I'm kind of a local person here to the Fall River, Taunton area.
Okay.
So I went to Bridgewater for my undergraduate degree. And I got that in anthropology.
Wow.
Which is really different, and not a lot of people know. They either think automatically they think of archaeology and Indiana Jones and
sure.
Sort of, rock digging, as some of my friends and family members would say. But
yeah.
Really my specialty was in cultural anthropology. I've just always been super curious about people and the way we live our lives and what it means to be a human. I love people and groups and families, and I get made fun of for it all the time by my friends. They're like, can we go anywhere and have you not talk to everyone? Like, absolutely not. So,
oh, that's great. It makes things interesting, though.
Yeah.
So how long have you actually been here at Morton?
So I've been here at Morton for almost a year. Next month we'll make a year, which is wild to think.
It is.
How quickly time passes that I've been here for almost a year. Some days I feel really new.
Yeah.
And then other days I feel like I've been here forever. So
yeah, well, you're still not the newest member of the team in outpatient psychiatry because that team has grown so much over the last almost 2 years now. I mean, we started with just Dr. Batista there, and then we welcomed 2 additional MDs or doctors, and then I believe you were the next one to join, and now we have another therapist, Rebecca. So that team has grown. It's awesome, which is great to keep up with the volume of patients who need your services.
Yes, yeah.
So you are actually an LICSW. What does that mean?
I am. So an LICSW is a licensed independent clinical social worker. So sort of in the world of social work, we have different educational levels and different licensing levels. LICSW is the highest sort of one that you can achieve, but really in general, we're all social workers. So we all operate under the same code of ethics, and we all have pretty much the same goals and directives.
Okay. And so what does a typical day look like for you? Because I know that some members of our team, some of the providers see patients up on the floors in our elder behavioral health services unit and the emergency department. Are you strictly seeing patients at our outpatient clinic?
I am, yes. So I'm helping a little bit now in the ED with just some pretty basic case management social work stuff, but typically my role looks just like, outpatient therapy in our outpatient psychiatry clinic. However, since I'm going on maternity leave soon, my caseload has dwindled a little bit. So I'm just trying to help out where I can. I think that's really the heart of social work, is identifying where there are needs and jumping in and, seeing how you can help and include yourself and be a part of a bigger team. Okay,
great. So what is the proper term? Therapist, psychiatrist, counselor, what do you typically use? What's most appropriate?
I mean, for me, I love being called a social worker because I just love social work. I'm really passionate about it, but I'm a clinical social worker. And so a lot of the times I will also refer to myself as a therapist for, for most people to understand sort of what it is that I do. Most people are familiar with the term therapist. And then sometimes when I say, I'm a therapist, they say, like a physical therapist.
Okay.
Like, oh, good. Thanks for thanks for pointing that out. No, more of a mental health therapist.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah, that's typically how I differentiate it.
Okay. And why do you think people, can often be hesitant to go see a mental health therapist?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Julie. And there's so many reasons. I think that there are, a lot of different things that either keep people from seeking mental health therapy or sort of prevent them, not necessarily even their own stuff, but one of the biggest things is culturally, what are a person's cultural views on mental health?
Yep.
If you're sort of from a culture that doesn't, have the best views on mental health or doesn't think that mental health is legitimate or as legitimate as physical health, and it can be really hard to say, hey, I might need some mental health help, let me seek that out. So culturally, sort of personally, how do you feel about mental health? Thinking about how people were raised, all of that. And then there's the other thing is accessibility. How accessible is mental health to you? And that can look like a few different things. Do you have health insurance? Therapy is really expensive if you don't have health insurance, just like anything else in the medical world, right? So accessibility is a huge thing. Are there spaces next to you where you can seek mental health treatment? Are there clinics? All of those things kind of impact a person's ability to meet their mental health needs. What are a person's capacity to identify if they need mental health treatment or not? That's a huge thing as well. We're not exactly taught from kindergarten or, high school or whatever, like how to assess for our own mental health needs. That's not necessarily always part of a health education curriculum. And so I think that that's changing, and there is sort of a shift toward the accessibility of mental health and kind of assessing yourself for mental health needs, but I think that there's also still the overall stigma.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely want to get into a little bit later, talking about some of those warning signs. What should you recognize either in your own behavior or someone else's. But first, we do have to take a quick commercial break, but stay with us. We'll be right back with more with Brienne from our outpatient psychiatry clinic and our psychiatry team here at Morton Hospital. We'll be right back.
We'll be back with more of Morton in the Morning in just a few moments here at WVBF.
From all of us at Morton Hospital, thank you to our community for voting for us in the 2021 Best of the Best Community Choice Awards. We're honored to have been voted Best Hospital, Best Audiologist, Best Hearing Aid Center, Best Physical Therapy, and Best Weight Loss Center in the Metro South region. Learn more about our services and quality achievements at mortonhospital.org and follow us on Facebook to stay up to date on what's happening at your award-winning community hospital.
And now back to Morton in the Morning here at WVBF, Hometown Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome back to today's Morton in the Morning show. We have a wonderful show and a really special guest, Brienne Wapenye from our outpatient psychiatry clinic here at Morton Hospital. She is one of the several members of our psychiatry team here at the hospital, and we are talking about the topic of mental health. And before we took our first break, we were talking to Brienne about her role here at the hospital, seeing patients in the outpatient clinic and also supporting patients in the emergency department. We were talking about what an outpatient therapist actually does and, why sometimes people are a little bit hesitant to see a therapist or a psychiatrist. But let's talk a little bit more. You mentioned the stigma. So how do you try to break down that stigma when you're talking with patients?
Yeah, I love that question because so many people think that going to a therapist is a stuffy, sort of weird situation. Mm-hmm. And, I really try my hardest to meet a patient where they're at.
Yep.
That's my number one goal, is to meet you where you're at. And so if I'm thinking about how I might break down that stigma, it looks a lot like creating a safe, predictable, non-judgmental, non-pressuring environment for people to always come to, mm-hmm. and also, more importantly, to leave when they want to. Mm-hmm. It's okay to come to me for a session or two, leave. Mm-hmm. It's okay if I don't see you for a few months and then you come back and say, oh, you know what, actually I've decided that this might really be helpful, and I'll still meet you where you're at. Sort of creating a place for people to realize, oh, hey, it's okay for me to need this and to utilize it. And I think, by breaking down what people's traditional ideas of therapy mm-hmm. is,
sure,
we can see an increase of people sort of utilizing it.
Absolutely. I think that's a great approach. And I also just remembered, recently Dr. Batista did an interview with the mayor of Taunton, Mayor yes. O'Connell. Mm-hmm. And, something that the way he was explaining it really resonated with me, because he was saying that, we all need therapy from time to time. He
sure.
said even the therapists need therapy.
Absolutely.
No one's really immune to it. It's just yep. taking care of ourselves mm-hmm. like we would if we had an injury. We would go to the ER. We would go to an orthopedic surgeon.
Absolutely.
If we had a heart problem, we'd go to the cardiologist. So it's not, not hesitating to take care of ourselves when we need that extra mental or behavioral support.
Absolutely. It's such a good reminder.
So, I'm sure everyone is so tired of COVID, obviously. We've had
sure.
been dealing with COVID for the last 2 years, but it has definitely had an impact on everyone's health and well-being in, so many different ways. So mm-hmm. how would you say it's impacted mental health overall?
This is such a heavy question.
Yeah.
It's something that I could probably go on and talk about for hours with you, Julie. But, I think it changed our lives in so many ways, both on the macro and micro levels, right? So on the ways that we operate as a society, but then also individually, mm-hmm. how we operate. I think when people look back at the height of being in the middle of COVID and mm-hmm. isolating and having so many unknowns and so many questions and not really knowing what was next, mm-hmm. We've all really experienced, and I've sort of categorized this as a collective trauma. Mm-hmm. I think you will see in the years to come, the studies will come out and prove that the effects of a pandemic like COVID and sort of having to take the measures that we took and deaths and people that we lost, I think you're going to see it. The impacts of it will be similar to things like world wars and other sort of collective traumas that that we face as societies and nations and the world and, in general. So very broadly, that's sort of what I think has impacted our mental health the most, is that we've gone through a collective trauma, and everything has shifted for us, right? From the way that we do schooling to the way that we go to work to the ways that we do groceries, right? Everything has changed.
Right.
And so as a society, when we experience this really abrupt change in the way that we function, there will be resistance to that, and there will be a lot of people who, even if you think you managed it well, it still sort of weighs heavy on your brain, right? I think everyone can think of a way that they have changed since COVID has happened, in the ways that they do things, the ways that they communicate with family members. And I think we can honestly say that some of it was positive, in the sense that we all had to really take a break, and we were forced to pay attention to each other in some way or another, which is a good thing. But then also, I think it gave a lot of people, a space to really focus and hone in on, opinions and, thoughts. I think everybody has a platform now to openly discuss that, which is great, but I think also plays into mental health, because now you're just surrounded by everyone's opinions and thoughts, and it can be really hard to take care of yourself in the midst of all of that, right? It plays into how we see each other and ourselves. And so again, there's 1,000,001 different ways that we've all been sort of affected by this, but I think in general our mental health sort of suffers when there are huge changes abruptly, like we experienced with COVID.
Absolutely. And I agree, when you sort of reference the longer term effects. I was actually doing some research when I was thinking about the types of questions that I wanted to ask you today. And one of the articles that I read, it kind of made me chuckle, but it's really so true, because I think we're all seeing it these days. But there was a therapist or a provider who used the term panger, which is pandemic anger, because of the fact that we've been, it reminds me of being like hangry when you're hungry and you're angry. Yeah. But because we've been dealing with this for so long, I think, it's natural to be sort of frustrated that it's still around and we're still dealing with it.
Absolutely. And I just want to take a minute to validate that. If that's something that you're experiencing, is some panger. I love that term, Julie. I might add that to my to my repertoire. But I think that it's so valid. Just because it's happening to everyone doesn't mean that it doesn't impact people on a micro level individually. And it's okay if you're feeling anxious, or if you're feeling worried, or if you're feeling overwhelmed, because it's normal to feel all those things about a situation that's rapidly changing. We're always constantly getting new information, and while that can be great, but also it can be scary at the same time. And so I think just recognizing, hey, I feel real anxious about this, validating that for yourself, give yourself a little bit of grace, take a step back and say, hey, that's a normal response to what we're dealing with, because in our lifetime, we've never had to deal with something like this.
Exactly.
It's truly, I hate to say, it is unprecedented. And so, therefore, anything that people are experiencing is pretty valid. And also, likewise, it's okay if you're not feeling anxious about it. It's okay if you're feeling totally over it. And it's okay if you sort of went through the pandemic fatigue and now you're saying, well, I'm no longer anxious about this. I no longer feel this way about that, or I never was anxious about it. That's okay too. And I think we don't focus enough or validate enough for those people either, that it's also okay to not be anxious about it.
Okay. Are there any specific groups or demographics of people that have really been more affected by COVID, from a mental health capacity, or is it really just across the board, everyone's different?
So across the board, everyone's different, but I will say that, and I can only be a little bit ethnocentric right now and talk about the United States in general, is that, any group that has been traditionally marginalized in our country is a demographic or a group that is going to be impacted the most by the pandemic, be that, Black, Indigenous, people of color, anybody that can really say that there's less access to the vaccine, to education, to treatment centers, all of that. They're disproportionate access to all of those things.
So underserved populations in general.
Yeah, traditionally, anybody who's been traditionally underserved or marginalized is going to experience or be hit harder by the pandemic and its longer lasting effects than those who aren't.
Okay. And, based on what you're seeing and just being out and about, do you think that things are improving, or are we going to have these long lasting effects for some time now?
I think that both. And I want to also mention, I would be... I wouldn't really know my audience if I didn't mention healthcare workers.
Yeah.
And the effect that this pandemic has had on healthcare workers. I knew that before working here at Morton, which is my first sort of like medical facility job.
Yep.
But I think it would be silly of me to skip over the effects of the pandemic on mental health or on medical healthcare workers.
Absolutely.
I mean, for a really long time during the pandemic, we were praising nurses and doctors and CNAs and staff throughout hospitals as heroes, and wow, look at all the work that they're doing. And then shortly thereafter, where does that praise go?
Yeah.
And so, these people are at the front lines of the pandemic and they're seeing things firsthand. And, the medical community has really come into question by people in our society. And so, it's really a shame to see that. And I think that I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that here because, the mental health of healthcare workers is so important because they're the ones that are doing the hard work, saving lives every day, hopefully spreading accurate healthcare information about the pandemic and other things. And so, I think that one of the reasons why I was brought onto the team was to also be a resource for the healthcare workers here in the hospital. And I have had a few people reach out, and it has been really helpful. And it's also sort of proven to me that, wow, these people went through an amazing amount of stress. And I feel like I would be remiss to not mention that they're one of the hardest hit sort of groups in the pandemic in general.
And I think, a lot of healthcare workers have just seen things throughout the pandemic that everyone else hasn't, Unfortunately, in the beginning, a lot of death, a lot of loss, very sad times, and it's hard to overcome that trauma if you haven't dealt with something like that before. And I think one of the great things that happened over the last year is you and the team of providers in the clinic actually offered, drop-in sessions for our employees, come down, talk, anyone, just open to anyone that needed a little bit of extra support if they're feeling overwhelmed. So I thought that was really great, and hopefully people took advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And those, we might not still have the drop-in hours, but I would encourage people to still reach out and make appointments if they need to. It's totally, HIPAA compliant. Just because you work here, doesn't mean that you're not going to get the same care as everybody else. And so, I would still kind of continue to encourage that because, like you said, there is an element of PTSD and trauma that comes along with that. And so I just wanted to mention that for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. So, we hear a lot of terms. I wanted to sort of clarify, what is the difference between mental health and mental illness?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, mental health and mental illness is like physical health and physical illness. We all have mental health, and sometimes we experience mental illness, right? So kind of like you were saying earlier, how, Dr. Batista was encouraging people to treat their mental health and mental illness like going to the ER. If you have a broken arm, you would go seek treatment for that, or giving insulin. If you had, that type of diabetes, you would treat your mental health and your mental illness the same way. And so for me,
ignoring it can obviously have bigger implications on your well-being.
Sure, just like ignoring any physical illness would as well. Mental illness is just the same, absolutely.
Okay. So this has been great so far. I definitely want you to talk a little bit about, what people can do if they're feeling extra stressed, if they're feeling overwhelmed, or if they're just really not feeling themselves and, something might be off with them. But before we get into that topic, we do have to take our second break. We have just about made it to the halfway point of today's show. We have to take another commercial break. If you're just joining us, we are here with Brienne of our psychiatry team here at Morton Hospital, talking all about the topic of mental health, and we will have much more when we come back after this short break.
We'll be back with more of Morton in the Morning in just a few moments here at WVBF.
Morton Hospital's nationally accredited Center for Weight Control has grown with the addition of Dr. Deepthi De Silva, our new Director of Medical Weight Loss Management. Our center now offers high-quality medical and surgical weight loss options close to home, with medical weight loss appointments now available in Taunton and Middleborough. To learn if you qualify for weight loss surgery or medical weight loss and to schedule a consultation, call our Center for Weight Control at 508-301-2434.
And now back to Morton in the Morning here at WVBF, Hometown Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of today's Morton in the Morning show. If you are just tuning in, we have had a great show so far because we are here with Brienne of our outpatient psychiatry clinic. She is one of 5 or 6 providers in our of our psychiatry team here at Morton Hospital who see patients in our outpatient clinic, as well as the emergency department, consulting on inpatients and assisting patients on our elder behavioral health services unit. And before we took our break, we have been talking to Brienne about her role here at the hospital, about the stigma associated with mental health and seeing a therapist, and how COVID has really affected a lot of groups of people with regard to their mental well-being. What are your, what's your advice for, coping skills, recommendations on staying mentally fit? How can we take care of ourselves and really focus on our mental health?
So a lot of the times that's sort of framed to us and to patients in general as stress reduction.
Okay.
And I want to sort of reframe that term, stress reduction. I think we're so focused on the reduction of negative things that we don't talk enough about how we can really increase the positive. So if we move away from stress reduction, let's move toward a space of self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And self sort of reflection on how stress might impact us or how, everything around us, because it can sometimes feel really overwhelming, everything that's going on. Outside of COVID, we still had everything else sort of happen at the same time as well. COVID just sort of added to that. And so if we move toward a space of reflecting on how stress impacts us, we can take stock in things like what's in my control, what is beyond my control, and sort of where might there be space for me to be managing things differently, or are there simply just things that you can't change? Simply just things that cause me stress, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can't control much or change much, and so it's like, well, what do we do then? Well, we talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. We give it space, we give it its time, but we also learn how to manage it. And sort of moving from there into where in my life can I incorporate those stress management techniques, mm-hmm. right? And so one of the ways to do this, if you're feeling like, I have no idea how to reflect on my stress and reflect on how stress impacts me. Here's my shameless plug for seeking a therapist. Yep. This is one of the ways in which a therapist can really help sort of sit down with you and be an objective person mm-hmm. to sort of ask those difficult questions that might point you toward a place of feeling like, oh, I have a better understanding of my stress, what it is that stresses me, yep. and how it impacts me, right? And then, again, moving into that space of increasing positive stress management techniques. Yep. I know that I'm going to sound like a broken record saying this, but movement is so important. Yep. No matter how it is that you moving your body once a day can feel really good. And the reason for that, and I know everybody knows this or has heard it at one point, but it increases like the feel-good chemicals in our brain, right? Mm-hmm. I call it like a happy chemical hack for our brain, right? It's a really nice way for us to make some natural feel-good, mood-boosting chemicals to float around up there. And so movement is one, and, that can look like taking a walk on your lunch break, a 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk. That can look like just getting up and stretching. Changing our scenery is so important sometimes if we're feeling stressed out or feeling really overwhelmed or anxious. Changing your scenery to something different. I always say that some of the best ways to manage anxiety, stress, feelings of overwhelmed is to engage your 5 senses. So we all know what those are. If I go to name them right now, I'm going to forget one. And so I won't do that. But we all know what our 5 senses
we know them. We just can't remember them.
Right. And it's only because I'm here talking to you that I would ever forget one. And if any of my patients heard me say that, they'd laugh because they're like, yep, you're always forgetting one over there. But, engaging our 5 senses, right? So, changing your scenery can mean a change in temperature, right? So regulating through changing your temperature. If it's cold outside, it's a really good time to go outside and get a breath of fresh air. If it's hot, like it is today, not the best time to do that, but you can find other ways to sort of engage your senses. Smelling something, touching something, and again, movement sort of helps with that too, but doing something to engage one of your senses or all 5 of your senses is another way to sort of give yourself a break in the moment.
Okay. What about movement like yoga, meditation? Is that highly recommended for people that are feeling overwhelmed? Or
Yeah, I love yoga and meditation for people who have the capacity to do yoga and meditation. It's really hard to sit across from an anxious person or somebody who's feeling really overwhelmed and say, why don't you meditate? Or why don't you do yoga? That might feel really low on their priority list, and it might feel really inaccessible to them in the moment.
Yeah.
If your brain is always constantly moving, and if your brain feels like you don't have control of it, skipping right into something like meditation might feel really overwhelming and really hard.
Yeah.
And I don't want to set anybody up for failure, right? So a lot of the times what I work on with my patients, and we start doing this in the office so that it's sort of guided, is mindfulness. And it's a little bit different than meditation in the sense that it's like meditation's younger sister, right? And so mindfulness is, again, just being aware of what is happening for you, being aware of the sensations in your body when you're feeling any which way, right? I encourage people to take stock in their bodies when they're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, depressed, but also happy when they're feeling great, and really sort of getting a little bit more mindfulness skills, and then maybe moving into something like meditation would be helpful.
Okay.
But that's sort of where I start with people, is sort of increasing that mindfulness.
Okay. Now, what about people who, are feeling disconnected because they tried to isolate at home, or they've done it for so long, maybe they still are because they have some health concerns?
Yeah.
How can they sort of reconnect and not feel so disconnected from everyone?
Yeah, that's so important, because I think for a while there, the world sort of met the needs of people who were already feeling those things, right? If you were already feeling agoraphobic, or somebody who struggled with social anxiety, or struggled with being out in public, or struggled with any of those things, and the world sort of met your needs for a little bit, right? It didn't demand that you go out and be present and do sort of all these things. And so for some people, I just want to acknowledge that those times felt safe for them.
Sure.
And I think for even people who didn't struggle with that, feeling isolated was hard, but it also maybe created a safe space because of COVID, or, any other reason for being isolated. And there are, to this day, still people who really struggle with re-engaging back into like the traditional things that we did before, or the quote-unquote normal things that we did before, right? A quick trip to Target, going into the grocery store instead of picking up our groceries, going to family parties. All of those things can feel really stressful to anybody, but especially for maybe people who have physical illness, mental illness, people who, welcomed babies during the pandemic. That was really hard for a lot of parents. There's a million and one different reasons why that feels uncomfortable. Do it slow, and don't sort of have any expectations or pressures on yourself to do things.
Okay.
It can be really hard because I think family members especially will provide their opinions.
Sure, absolutely.
Where they feel is necessary, right? Like, oh, why aren't you coming out? The pandemic's over. Get over it. It's fine. Well, for some people, it feels really scary to go to a family party of 50 people after 2.5 years or 2 years of us not doing that and being told that that wasn't safe. So it's really hard to sort of switch your brain back to a place where, oh, okay, 50 people is a safe number of people to be around.
Yeah.
And so just acknowledge that it feels scary for yourself. Again, sort of be mindful about how that impacts you. Mm-hmm. If you are going out, what are you feeling? What are you experiencing in your body? What do you need to do to feel like, oh, I could be more successful at this? Do I need to start off small? It's okay for me to maybe go to Target at 8 p.m. before they close on a Tuesday where there's not a lot of people there and use that as my first experience.
Right.
Or a smaller family gathering of 10 or 15 people and see how that feels. Really just taking it step by step, again, with that mindfulness and self-awareness of how this might be impacting you, what this might feel like, and what do I need to do to feel better or safer about this choice. Do I need to bring my own car? Right? Sort of managing the moment for yourself and really coming up with ways that, okay, if I do this, how do I A, feel safer, and B, how do I set myself up for success?
Okay,
Yeah.
Great ideas. So, what are the warning signs that we should be watching out for, either in ourselves or in others that might indicate we or someone else might need some support?
Yeah, and so I'll just start off by saying anyone who is an imminent threat to themselves or to other people requires emergency services, right? And so that includes dialing 911 or, if the person is willing, visiting the local emergency room with them. So if anybody is overtly saying suicidal ideation or comments or homicidal or abusive even statements, those people require emergency services. So I just want to sort of preclude all of this with that.
We have members of our team who support patients in the emergency department as well.
Absolutely. Great members of the team that do that for sure. And so, otherwise, not every situation is imminent like that, but otherwise some things to look out for in yourself or somebody else is, I'll just say, overall behavioral changes, right? If somebody's presenting as more irritable or more, aggressive or agitated, that can sometimes be a sign that, hey, something might not be going well for them. I say behavioral changes because that really encompasses all things like substance use, that mood shifts, making statements that are typical of them, or just outright saying all the time, I'm stressed, or, I can't do this, or I need help, or really sort of looking for signs, and sometimes that person is just simply saying it. But overall behavioral changes are the biggest predictor of if somebody needs, any kind of mental health help or extra support. And I think for those people, if you're noticing that about, your friend, family, or loved one, check in with them.
That's definitely great advice, but obviously, sometimes it can be scary to approach somebody. You don't know how they're going to react. You don't want to make it worse if you approach someone and say, what's going on? Is everything okay? So I definitely want to talk to you next about what's the best approach to intervening and finding out if someone really is okay or if they need some added support. But before that, we do have to take our final break of today's show. If you're just tuning in, we have been talking all about mental health and well-being with Brienne Wapenyi from our psychiatry team. And we have more with Brienne when we return. So please stay with us, and we'll be back right after this short commercial break.
We'll be back with more of Morton in the Morning in just a few moments here at WVBF.
From all of us at Morton Hospital, thank you to our community for voting for us in the 2021 Best of the Best Community Choice Awards. We're honored to have been voted Best Hospital, Best Audiologist, Best Hearing Aid Center, Best Physical Therapy, and Best Weight Loss Center in the Metro South region. Learn more about our services and quality achievements at mortonhospital.org and follow us on Facebook to stay up to date on what's happening at your award-winning community hospital.
And now back to Morton in the Morning here at WVBF, Hometown Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morton in the Morning. This is the final segment of today's show. We hope you have been enjoying the show. We have a great guest today on a great topic of mental health and wellness. If you're just tuning in and, it's a topic you're interested in and you've missed most of the show, don't worry. We always post a link to listen to our shows online. We post it on our Facebook page, so we'll share a link of this show probably by this weekend at facebook.com/Morton Hospital MA. You can find us there and you can listen to any of the shows that you might have missed online at any time. So during this final portion, we are still here with Brianne Wapenyi. She is an outpatient therapist. She's an LICSW, and she sees patients in our outpatient psychiatry clinic. She's been providing a lot of great tips on, how we can maintain our mental wellness. And before we took the break, we were talking a little bit about some of the warning signs that you might recognize in a loved one, a family member or a friend that might, indicate that they are struggling at the time. So what I wanted to ask you is, what's the best approach to intervene with someone who you feel needs that extra support?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time we're so afraid of, I'll just make it worse if I say something. Yeah. Or, especially if that person is irritable.
Right.
Right? I'll just make it worse. Well, it can be so scary. I'll validate that, to approach somebody about these things, but it can also be so transformative to have somebody sit down with you and ask you, how are you feeling? Validating them, saying, hey, there's so much going on for you right now. I don't know how you're doing it. What's going on for you? How are you feeling about all of this? Really just sort of meeting them where they're at, right? Again, to sort of tie that back in, is meeting people where they're at. If you are coming at somebody with that approach, it's a lot easier for that person to kind of be vulnerable in the moment. If you've sort of laid the groundwork to be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm just noticing this, or hey, man, it must be so stressful, things are so hard right now, tell me how you feel. It's so much easier for somebody to be open and vulnerable and say, yeah, actually, you're right, I'm really stressed out, I could use help, versus if you're coming to somebody and saying, hey, you're being really aggressive lately.
Right.
What's up
wrong?
with that?
Yeah.
Right. So the last thing you want to do is sort of put the other person in defense mode, or have a reason to defend themselves, or feel like they need to be put on the defensive. And so I've found that the easiest way to do that is to just be vulnerable yourself and to validate. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been incredible. You shared such great information, great tips. I feel like I've had a therapy session myself almost.
Well, you're always welcome.
So, in closing, in general, what do you want people to know if they're feeling that way? If they're feeling overwhelmed, if they're feeling stressed, what should they know?
I just want people to know that it's totally normal. The world right now feels like it's going, a little bit out of control. Yeah. And I just want to validate everyone's experience. If you are disconnecting from maybe the news or social media or, anything like that to sort of protect yourself, that's okay. You don't always have to be in the know. You don't always have to know everything that's going on. It's okay to sort of set yourself some limits and boundaries with what you're willing to consume as a person right now. And that's sort of another stress management tip there too, is to just sort of set your own limits and boundaries around, what am I consuming? And that's sort of something that you can control and that is in your control. It's okay. And no matter what anybody is feeling, I want to validate it, because along with COVID, we're still experiencing all of the other scary things that are happening in our country and in the world. Yeah. There are a lot of positive things happening too, but there are a whole lot of scary things happening as well. And so therapists don't always have the right tools, right? And psychiatrists certainly don't always have the magic pill to make everything around us better and to sort of correct everything that we feel stressed out about, or, have everything like that go away. But what our hope is that we can create a space for you to come and feel less alone, to feel validated, to feel heard, and to maybe learn some ways to manage that stress. And so that's just what I hope for people to know, is that that's sort of the goal of therapists and psychiatrists across the board.
Okay, it's normal, and the great thing is there are wonderful resources available, like we have here in our clinic through yourself and the other members of our team. So,
absolutely.
Well, great. I'm sure our listeners thoroughly enjoyed all of this. We appreciate you being here and sharing such wonderful information and recommendations. So thank you, Brienne, and maybe we'll have you on again soon.
Awesome. I'd look forward to that. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. All right, well, what a great show. We had so much great information. I'm so happy that the whole show was dedicated to this topic because it is such an important topic, as Brienne reiterated, and she provided some really great coping tips, tips on, what warning signs to watch out for, how to approach someone who seems like they're struggling. And if you missed the show, don't worry, you can listen in on our Facebook page. We'll post a link later this week, and you can hear our full interview with Brienne about the topic of mental health and wellness. So thank you again to Brienne. Again, she is one of multiple providers that see patients here at the hospital for mental health needs. She sees patients in our outpatient psychiatry clinic, which is right here on site at Morton Hospital. If you want to learn more about that clinic, or if you'd like to call to try to schedule an appointment for yourself, you can call them at 508-828-7880. Again, that's 508-828-7880. You can also find some information about all of our behavioral health services on our website at mortonhospital.org. So that just about wraps up our time, but a couple of reminders, and again, a thank you to our entire community for voting for us in the Best of the Best Community Choice Awards for 2022. Actually, I should say nominating us, because the nomination round was last month. That is now over, but thanks to your nominations, Morton Hospital has made it to the final voting round in 6 different categories. And those categories are Best Hospital/Medical Center, Best Hearing Aid/Hearing Specialist, Best Orthopedics Center, Best Physical Therapy, Best Places to Work, and Best Weight Loss Center. So thank you very, very much for nominating us in those categories. The voting period for the Best of the Best Awards will run from August 9th through August 23rd. So we hope that you will log in to the Taunton Gazette website or follow the link on our Facebook page once we have it posted. You can vote for us daily in those categories, and we really hope we can count on your vote. It's a great way for us to recognize the incredible work of our team here at Morton Hospital and the great services that they provide to our community. So watch out for that voting to begin on August 9th. And then before we wrap up, because I haven't mentioned it yet today, but I always like to share a reminder about how you can contact us here at Morton in the Morning. Our email address is mortoninthemorning@steward.org. That's MORTON in the morning at STEWARD.org. Reach out to us at any time if you have any follow-up questions about the show. Maybe you missed the phone number to one of our services that we mentioned. Maybe you wanted to clarify something. Maybe you just want to give us some general feedback, or if you have a suggestion for any future shows. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we will be doing an interview with a couple more of our providers in our psychiatry clinic to talk about some special programs as well as the services available in our emergency department. We'll also be doing a check-in with our team on our MORCAP unit, which is our substance use disorder treatment unit up here on the 3rd floor of the hospital, and finding out, how that unit has grown and how things are going and what types of services they offer. So we look forward to those interviews in the coming weeks. And again, if you missed the show, you can always find it online. You can listen online. We post a link on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Morton Hospital MA, or just search Morton Hospital on Facebook. And follow our page so you stay up to date on everything happening here at Morton Hospital. And you can listen to all of our shows there as well. So we want to thank you again so much for listening today. Thank you to Brienne for joining us and providing such great content for today's show and some great tips for all of our listeners. And we will be joining you again next week. From all of us at Morton Hospital, we hope you have a happy and healthy week, and we hope that you'll join us again every Wednesday at 11:05 a.m. right here on WVBF, your hometown radio station. Morton Hospital's nationally accredited Center for Weight Control has grown with the addition of Dr. Deepthi De Silva, our new Director of Medical Weight Loss Management. Our center now offers high-quality medical and surgical weight loss options close to home, with medical weight loss appointments now available in Taunton and Middleborough. To learn if you qualify for weight loss surgery or medical weight loss and to schedule a consultation, call our Center for Weight Control at 508-301-2434.